My father kicked me out on Christmas Day for refusing to give my gift to my spoiled brother and told me, "Don't come back until you learn some respect." Now my parents can't control him and are losing their minds. They are begging me to come back. Sup Reddit. My parents always played favorites. Everything in our house revolved around my younger brother, and I got stuck being the older kid who should just understand. But those people weren't done yet. Before we get to that, let me start from the beginning. I'm 20 now, but this goes back to when I was around 11. I've got a younger brother who's 6 years younger than me, and my parents spoiled him to the point where the whole house basically revolved around him. I was the older one, so to them, that meant I had to be the bigger person. The rule in our house was simple. If I had something, he had to have it too. If I was using something, he had the right to use it whenever he asked. If I said no, my parents swooped in and made me give it up. I never wanted to share with him for a very good reason. He destroyed everything he touched. If he got bored, he'd start yanking buttons off, losing pieces, chewing on controllers, or just leaving things somewhere until they got broken. He didn't care. If it wasn't fun anymore, he dropped it, and it was me left with something ruined. The Nintendo 3DS was the first real example. I begged for that thing for months before my 12th birthday. When I finally got it, I treated it like treasure. For a couple of days, it felt like I had something that was mine. Then my brother decided he wanted to play with it. I said no. I already knew how it would end, but my parents didn't care. They told me to hand it over, and when I didn't, they literally took it out of my hands and gave it to him. Sure enough, a few hours later, he got bored and tossed it onto the floor. I flipped. My parents acted like I was being dramatic. They said, "You're older, you can handle it." That was their go-to line. When I pushed back harder, they threatened to take it away completely. And they actually did a few times, giving it to him like it was his property, not mine. The only reason that changed was because my aunt happened to come over one day and saw my parents physically take the 3DS from me to give it to my brother. She absolutely lit into them. She told them straight up that the favoritism was disgusting, that they were raising him to think he could take whatever he wanted, and that I had every right not to share if I didn't want to. My parents didn't argue with her to her face, but after she left, they blamed me for making them look bad. Still, they gave me my 3DS back and stopped forcing me to share it. Of course, instead of telling my brother no, they went out and bought him his own a few days later. That was how things always went. If he wanted to use my stuff, I was expected to hand it over even though I knew he'd wreck it. And when I got upset about it, my parents acted like I was selfish. It wasn't just gaming stuff either. If I was watching TV and he wanted to change the channel, I had to give in. If I got a snack, suddenly he was entitled to half of it, even if I paid for it with my allowance. If I had friends over, he had to be included in everything or else my parents would accuse me of excluding him. Even my room wasn't really private. If I locked the door to keep him out, I'd get yelled at. They acted like the whole house belonged to him first, then the rest of us. The thing was, it wasn't just annoying, it was demoralizing. Nothing was ever really mine. Even if I got something with my own money, it eventually ended up being treated like family property. And every single time he got bored and broke it, I was the one stuck cleaning it up or getting lectured for not sharing nicely enough. My aunt was the only adult who actually saw through it. She didn't live with us, but when she visited, she noticed everything. She'd pull me aside and tell me she could see how unfair it was, that I wasn't crazy or selfish. At the time, I probably didn't realize how much that meant, but looking back, it was the only validation I got. Meanwhile, my parents never even pretended to hide their favoritism. They'd openly say, "He's younger, he doesn't understand," or "You're older, you should know better." That was their excuse for everything. It didn't matter how many things he destroyed or how badly he acted out. The solution was always to give him whatever he wanted and expect me to just deal with it. By the time I was 13, I already knew nothing in that house was really mine. My brother could wreck anything he touched, and my parents would still defend him. My job was to take the loss and stay quiet. We had family over that year, cake on the table, presents stacked up. Everything was normal until it came time to blow out the candles. Everyone started singing. I leaned in, and right before I could do it, my mom leaned down and whispered, "Let your brother blow them out too. He's upset." I froze. "No, it's my birthday." Her smile dropped. "Don't be selfish. Just let him." I shook my head. My dad jumped in with, "Stop acting spoiled, just share the moment." That was it. I'd had enough. It's my cake, my birthday. Why should he get to do it? The room went quiet. My parents glared at me like I'd committed some crime. Then my aunt cut in. She raised her voice. "Are you serious right now? It's his birthday, not the younger one's. Stop coddling him." Everyone's eyes went from her to my parents. You could feel the tension. My brother was already pouting, red in the face, and when I blew out the candles, he lunged forward and actually tried to spit on the cake. My aunt stepped in front, blocked him, and gave him the scolding of his life. He ran to my mom crying, and of course she acted like he was the one hurt. But people saw it for what it was, pure favoritism. My parents didn't even try to save face after that. They sulked through the rest of the night while my aunt basically ran the party so I could still enjoy it. That was the first time I realized even birthdays weren't really mine. The next year, 14, proved it even more. About 2 weeks before the day, my parents sat me down at the kitchen table. I knew right away something was up. Mom folded her hands like she was breaking bad news. "We've decided there won't be a party this year." I blinked. "What? Why?" Dad leaned back in his chair, calm like it was nothing. "You'll still get a cake and a couple of presents, but no party. It's just easier." I stared at him. "Easier for who?" "Because it's definitely not easier for me." Mom sighed, like I was being difficult. "You know how your brother gets. Last year was such a disaster. We don't want to go through that again." "So because he threw a fit, I don't get to have a party?" I said, my voice rising. "How is that fair?" Dad shook his head. "Life isn't always fair. You're older, you should understand that by now." I laughed in disbelief. "No, what I understand is you'd rather cancel my birthday than tell him no for once. That's what this is really about." Mom's eyes narrowed. "Don't talk to us like that. We're doing this for everyone's sake." "For everyone's sake?" I snapped. "Or just his? Because let's be real, everything is always about him. Every single time." Dad slammed his hand down on the table. "Watch your tone. You don't disrespect us in this house." "And you don't respect me," I shot back. "You're really going to look me in the eye and tell me I don't deserve a party because he might cry? You'd rather let him run the house than celebrate me for one day?" The kitchen went dead silent. My parents stared at me, angry, but with nothing to say. Finally, Mom muttered, "You'll thank us when you're older." "Yeah," I said, standing up. "I'll thank you for proving you don't care about me unless someone else is watching." And then I walked out before I said anything worse. That fight changed something in me. It wasn't just about the cake or the presents. It was about knowing they could erase my day without even blinking. They weren't protecting me from anything. They were protecting themselves from the effort of parenting my brother. At school the next week, I told my friends, teachers, even my counselor what happened. Everyone was outraged on my behalf. The vice principal pulled me aside and said he was sorry I had to deal with that at home. Word spread fast. Parents of other kids found out, and before long, my own parents were getting called out online and over the phone. My parents grounded me for embarrassing the family. They said I was exaggerating, that I made them look bad. But I kept talking, telling everyone I was grounded just for being upset about losing my birthday. That only made the backlash worse. People started messaging my parents directly, demanding to know what was wrong with them. A few days later, my dad walked into my room with his arms crossed. "You're ungrounded." That was it. No apology, no explanation, just ungrounded. I figured the party was still dead, though, because they never mentioned it again. My brother thought it was hilarious, rubbing it in every chance he got. "You don't even get a party this year," he'd sneer. After that whole mess, I'd already accepted that the day was basically dead. My brother was still laughing at me every chance he got, telling me I was too boring for a party or that no one wanted to come anyway. It stung, but I just expected to get a cake at home, blow out candles, and be done with it. So when my parents suddenly told me to get ready to go out for dinner that weekend, I didn't think much of it. We'd gone out to restaurants before for birthdays, usually cheap ones, so I figured that's what they meant. I put on a clean shirt, shrugged, and got in the car. We pulled up to my favorite restaurant, the one with the little arcade section in the back, and I immediately felt suspicious. My parents had never taken me there for a birthday before. As soon as I walked in, my friends jumped out from behind a booth yelling, "Surprise!" There were balloons, a cake, and even some decorations. For a split second, I was stunned. Then it hit me. This wasn't some long-planned party. This was damage control. The whole thing felt rushed. You could see it in the details. The decorations didn't match. The cake looked like it was bought that day, and half the adults there looked awkward, like they were only showing up out of obligation. Still, it was better than nothing. I had all my friends in one place, arcade tokens in my pocket, and a table full of pizza and wings. The biggest surprise, though, was the gift. Toward the end of the night, my dad handed me a wrapped box. When I tore it open, inside was a PS4. My jaw dropped. That was the one thing I'd been talking about for months. It was expensive, and I hadn't expected it at all. My dad gave this stiff little smile, but I could tell by the look on his face that it had been a last-minute, painful purchase. Later, my aunt would joke that he looked like a moth flew out of his wallet when he bought it. Of course, the party couldn't go smoothly. My brother started sulking the second I opened the PS4. He didn't care that there were people watching. He started whining loudly that it wasn't fair I got something so cool. My mom tried to shush him, but he just got louder. When the cake came out, he made a move to push it off the table right as everyone finished singing. This time, though, my dad actually stopped him. He grabbed my brother by the arm and told him firmly to sit down. It shocked me. I'd never seen him step in like that before. But my brother wasn't done. He threw himself on the floor, kicking and screaming, until my mom picked him up and carried him outside. She spent most of the party sitting in the car with him, while the rest of us stayed inside. My dad even stood guard for a while to make sure my brother didn't run back in to cause trouble. For once, they actually made an effort to protect my moment, instead of sacrificing it to keep him calm. It didn't erase everything, but I enjoyed the night. I got to play arcade games with my friends, eat pizza, and laugh without constantly looking over my shoulder. For a few hours, I felt like a normal teenager celebrating his birthday, instead of the kid who always came second. Still, I knew why that party happened. It wasn't because my parents suddenly realized they were wrong. It was because people had called them out. Family, friends, other parents. They were embarrassed. The surprise party was their way of saving face, of proving to everyone else that they could be fair. If nobody had spoken up, I'm convinced they would have let my birthday die without a second thought. The night ended with my aunt giving me a hug and whispering, "Don't let them take this from you. Tonight's yours." That meant more to me than anything else. She was the only one who consistently reminded me I deserved better. Driving home, I sat in the back seat with the PS4 box on my lap, and my brother sulking silently beside me. He kept shooting me dirty looks, but he couldn't do anything about it. My parents were too drained to entertain his tantrums. The whole car was tense, but I didn't care. For the first time in years, I felt like I'd actually won something. That birthday ended up being the last big one I'd have while living with them. After that, things went back to small pizza parlor dinners and plain cakes. But that 14th stood out. Not because my parents suddenly changed, but because for one night, they couldn't hide from the fact that everyone else saw the truth. Edie, by the time I was 15, I was basically the built-in babysitter. If my parents wanted to go out, it was assumed I'd stay home and watch him. If I had plans with friends, too bad, I had to cancel. They never even asked me most of the time. They'd just say, "We're leaving. Keep an eye on your brother." And that was that. He knew he had all the power too. If I told him no or tried to set boundaries, he'd scream until my parents came home. And then I'd get blamed for not cooperating. School was the only break I got. At least there I could be my own person. But even then, I couldn't fully relax. My brother went to the same school, and anytime he caused problems, teachers would call my parents. And somehow it would turn into me being expected to set a better example. Like it was my fault he acted the way he did. I'd usually hear it secondhand, either my parents repeating it to me after a call home, or sometimes a teacher pulling me aside directly, like his behavior was somehow my responsibility. The only thing that gave me any real independence was getting a part-time job. At 16, I started working at a grocery store after school and on weekends. It was mostly bagging groceries, cleaning up spills, and stocking shelves. But it was mine. I got a paycheck with my own name on it, and that meant more to me than I can explain. Quick pause, fellas. YouTube just dropped this new hype feature. If you're hooked on this story, smash that hype button. It tells YouTube this video deserves to blow up, and it keeps even crazier stories coming your way. Thanks so much for your support. All right, back to the drama. I saved every dollar I could. At first, it was just small stuff. I bought my own bike off Craigslist so I didn't have to depend on my parents for rides. It wasn't much to look at, but it gave me freedom. Then I saved enough to build a cheap gaming PC from used parts I found online. It took weeks to get all the components, and half the time I had to watch YouTube tutorials just to figure out what I was doing, but eventually I had a setup that was mine. I didn't have to worry about my brother barging in and breaking it because I kept the thing in my room and locked it up when I wasn't home. My parents hated me locking doors and usually yelled when I did it, but by then I didn't care. I'd rather take their anger than let him trash something else. My parents weren't happy about me working. They said I was too focused on money and accused me of not being around for family. But the reality was, they didn't like that I had something they couldn't control. They tried a few times to guilt me into spending my paychecks on things for the house or for my brother, but I didn't budge. That money was my line in the sand. Those years were exhausting. Most days I'd go to school, head straight to work, come home late, and collapse into bed. My friends started hanging out without me because I couldn't always join them, and that stung. But at the same time, I knew I was building something for myself, even if it was small. Every shift meant more distance between me and the house I hated being in. My aunt was the only one who encouraged me. She told me I was smart for saving, that I needed to think about the future, and that I should plan my exit as soon as I turned 18. She didn't sugarcoat it. She said, "They're never going to change. You need to take care of yourself." She was right. By the time I was 17, I'd managed to save a decent amount. Not enough to live on my own yet, but enough to make me feel like I had options. That mattered more than anything else. Options meant freedom. Freedom meant I didn't have to depend on people who constantly reminded me I came second. At home, nothing improved. My brother still got away with everything. He trashed the living room, and I got blamed for not watching him. He broke dishes, and I was the one told to clean it up. He screamed until he got what he wanted, and I was always told to understand. The difference was, by then, I had a mental countdown running in my head. Every paycheck, every month, I was closer to leaving for good. By the time I was 17, I'd already made up my mind that I'd be moving out the second I turned 18. I had money saved from my job, a plan, and my aunt's support. But the final straw came that Christmas, when my parents decided once again that their golden boy's feelings mattered more than mine. We had family over that night, cousins, uncles, and my aunt. The tree was lit up, gifts stacked underneath, food on the table. For once, I was actually looking forward to it. I'd saved up and bought myself a new gaming headset as a little treat. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. After we opened presents, I plugged it into my console in the living room to try it out while people were still chatting and eating. That's when my brother stomped in. He pointed at the headset and said, "Give it to me, I want to play." I didn't even look up. "No, I just got it. Go use your stuff." He immediately started whining. "But I don't want my old one, I want that one." "It's not fair." I ignored him. That was my first mistake. Ignoring him meant he had to get louder. He started yelling, "Mom! Dad! He won't share." Sure enough, my parents came rushing in like the building was on fire. "Mom, why can't you just let him try it? It's Christmas. Don't be difficult." Me. "Because it's brand new and he'll break it. He always breaks my stuff. This one is mine." "Dad, you're ruining the mood. Just let him have a turn and stop being selfish." Me. "I'm not being selfish. He has his own. He got a pile of gifts under the tree tonight, and now he's crying because he wants mine? That's not my problem." My brother was already fake crying, clutching my mom's arm and sniffling like he'd just been betrayed. Mom petted his hair and glared at me. "Why do you always have to make things harder than they need to be?" "Because I'm tired of this," I snapped. Every holiday, every birthday, everything always gets ruined because you bend over backwards for him. When do I get to have something that's just for me? Dad's face turned red. "Don't you dare talk to us like that in front of the family." "Why not?" I shot back. "They should hear it too. Maybe then you'll realize how messed up this is." The room went quiet. My aunt looked ready to jump in, but she held back for the moment. My brother was still whining, louder now, stomping his feet. My mom held him close like he was a baby. "Mom, we're not doing this tonight. Hand it over and be done with it." Me. "No. I bought this myself. With my money. It's mine." Dad slammed his hand on the coffee table, making the plates rattle. "If you're going to act like this, then you can get out. Go cool off until you can be respectful." I froze. "You're throwing me out? On Christmas? Because I won't give him my headset?" Dad didn't blink. "You heard me. Get out." The room erupted. My aunt immediately stood up and said, "Are you out of your minds? He didn't do anything wrong." A couple cousins whispered to each other. My mom ignored them and kept rubbing my brother's back like she was comforting a victim. I stood up slowly. "Fine. You want me gone? I'll go." As I unplugged the headset, grabbed my console from under the TV, and started walking toward my room. Dad barked, "Leave it! That's family property." I turned around, staring him down. "No, it's mine. The headset is mine because I paid for it. And the console was a gift to me." He glared, but he didn't move. I packed what I could into a duffel bag in under 10 minutes. Clothes, my console, a couple personal things, and headed for the door. Nobody stopped me except my aunt, who followed me out. She whispered, "Come to my place. You're not sleeping outside tonight." As I walked out the door, my dad called after me. "Don't come back until you learn some respect." My brother's laughter followed me out into the cold. I trudged down the street with my bag slung over one shoulder. It was freezing, but I didn't care. My aunt drove up a few minutes later and picked me up. She made me a plate of food, sat me down, and told me I didn't deserve any of what just happened. That night, my phone buzzed with texts from my parents. None of them were apologies. They said things like, You embarrassed us in front of everyone, and this is what happens when you refuse to cooperate. Not one message asked if I was okay. Sitting there in my aunt's guest room, I made my decision. I was done. I wasn't going back to live under that roof again. I'd stick it out with my aunt until I turned 18, and then I'd make my own way. I'd been pushed aside my entire life to keep my brother happy, but this was the moment I knew I was finished playing along. That Christmas didn't just ruin the holiday, it ended whatever was left of me believing I was part of that family. Moving in with my aunt felt like stepping into a different world. Her house wasn't huge or fancy, but it was peaceful. I could actually relax. I kept working at the grocery store, saved up more money, and when I turned 18 a few months later, I made it official. I packed up my things and told my parents I wasn't coming back. They didn't put up much of a fight. My dad just sent a short text saying, "Do what you want." My mom didn't even message me at all. The silence said everything. They were more upset about me not being there to pick up the slack than they were about me leaving. At my aunt's, I picked up more hours at work and started learning basic stuff like cooking, budgeting, and paying bills. It wasn't glamorous, but it felt like freedom. Every time I sat down to play without someone barging in to steal it, I remembered why leaving had been the right choice. Meanwhile, my parents were left to deal with my brother without me around. I didn't hear much at first, just bits and pieces from my aunt. She told me he was harder to manage now that I wasn't there to distract him. He'd always used me as a punching bag, someone to steal from, argue with, or boss around. And without me in the house, all that energy turned on my parents. At first, I brushed it off. I figured they'd finally learn what I'd been trying to tell them for years. But then his 14th birthday rolled around, and that's when karma hit them like a truck. My aunt told me he'd been begging for a PS5 for months. My parents promised him something nice, but a PS5 was too expensive. So instead, they got him a few smaller gifts: games, clothes, some gadgets. The second he realized there was no PS5, he exploded. According to my aunt, he didn't just pout or cry. He went completely off the rails. He started screaming at the top of his lungs, calling my parents liars and saying they didn't love him. Then he grabbed a chair and started smashing everything in sight. He broke picture frames, knocked over lamps, and even cracked the TV screen. According to my aunt, the house looked like a storm had ripped through it by the time he was done. She told me neighbors even called to ask if everything was okay, because they could hear the yelling from outside. My parents tried to calm him down, but they'd never once told him no in his entire life. So he ignored them and kept destroying things until my dad finally dragged him into his room. The collateral damage, she said, was brutal. Furniture busted, decorations shattered, electronics wrecked. She estimated it was hundreds, maybe even thousands of dollars in damage. And the worst part? My parents just sat there afterward, looking like ghosts. She said they looked mentally checked out, like they'd finally realized they couldn't control the monster they'd created. For me, hearing about it was surreal. I wasn't happy about the destruction, but I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel like justice. For years, they'd sacrificed me at the altar of keeping him happy. Now they were stuck dealing with the consequences. When I saw my parents a couple weeks later at a family get-together, they looked 10 years older. They barely talked, and when they did, it was to complain quietly about how difficult my brother had become. My dad muttered to my aunt that he wished they could afford military school or some kind of boarding school because they didn't know what else to do. My aunt shot him a look like, "Well, what did you expect?" My brother wasn't even embarrassed by what he'd done. He bragged about it to some of my cousins like it was funny. "They didn't get me what I wanted, so I trashed the house," he said with a smirk. The worst part was, you could see the fear in my parents' eyes. They weren't disciplining him anymore. They were just trying to avoid setting him off again. My aunt told me that behind closed doors, they admitted they wished they had done things differently. It wasn't long before the regret started spilling out toward me. At first, it came as little comments. My dad would mumble, "We miss having you around." Or my mom would say, "The house feels empty without you." Then it turned into full-on pleas. One night, my mom actually called me crying. She said, "We made mistakes. We should have treated you better. Please come back home." She tried to frame it like things would be different now, like we could start fresh. I didn't buy it. I asked her straight up, if I came back, would anything actually change? Or would it be just like before? She didn't answer. She just begged me to think about it. A week later, my dad showed up at my aunt's house unannounced. He didn't yell or demand anything. He just looked tired. He sat me down and said, "We know we were hard on you. We thought we were doing what was best at the time, but we see now we screwed up. Your brother's out of control. We can't handle him alone." That was the first time he ever admitted out loud that they'd made mistakes. But even then, I could tell it wasn't just about regret. It was about desperation. They didn't miss me because they loved me. They missed me because I had been their safety net. I was the one who kept my brother somewhat in check. Without me, they were drowning. I told him calmly, "I'm not coming back. You made your choice a long time ago." He tried to argue, saying, "We're still your family." I shook my head. Family doesn't treat you like I was treated. You wanted me gone the second I stood up for myself. You can't take that back now. He didn't have an answer. He just left, looking older than I'd ever seen him. Meanwhile, my brother kept spiraling. My aunt said he stopped getting invited to classmates' parties years ago, but now even neighbors' kids didn't want to hang out with him. He'd throw tantrums when other kids didn't give him attention. At home, he'd refuse to do chores, refuse to listen, and when my parents tried to put their foot down, he'd explode. Once, he even punched a hole in the drywall. As for me, I kept my distance. I focused on work, saving money, and building a life that was finally mine. I rented a small place with a roommate, bought my own furniture, and enjoyed the simple peace of knowing no one was going to barge into my room and demand my things. My parents kept reaching out now and then, sometimes with guilt, sometimes with apologies, sometimes just asking me to come for a visit. I went a few times, but every time I saw my brother screaming at them while they sat there helpless, I was reminded why I left. It was ironic. They'd spent years ignoring me to keep him happy. Now, they couldn't even handle the monster they'd built. They had tried to buy his love with favoritism, but all it did was teach him that no one else mattered. And when the day came that they finally needed me, I was gone. I won't lie. I felt a sense of satisfaction, not because I wanted them to suffer, but because for once, they were forced to see the truth. They'd begged me to come back, but I wasn't their scapegoat anymore. I wasn't the invisible kid who gave up everything so their favorite could shine. I was my own person, living my own life, free of the house that had treated me like an afterthought. They spent years throwing me under the bus to keep my brother happy. Now they're stuck with the chaos they created, begging me to come back. But I'm not their safety net anymore. I'm not the scapegoat. I'm not the invisible kid. I'm free. And that's something they can never take back.